Dr. Rizzo, I think you can begin.
Thank you, Katie, and welcome everybody to our annual membership meeting for the American Brain Coalition. Welcome members, welcome guests. We're glad to be participating with you virtually this year. It beats the alternative, but next year I hope we'll be meeting in person. I think we have a really great agenda for you today. We're going to be presenting a Neuroscience Champion Award to the co-chairs of the Congressional Neurosciences Caucus. We're also going to have two special guests regarding the Neuroscience Center of Excellence that we of the ABC and other organizations have been advocating for. We also have a special panel discussion on foreign trained physicians and getting visas and how this helps the patient access issue we're all interested in. Hopefully we'll also hear from our committee chairs, but if we run out of time, we'll give you a written report on all the essentials following the meeting. I'd like to introduce our board members, our new board members, but before we get to that, we want to recognize our friend and outgoing board member, Dr. Emmanuel Chico Bloom. Dr. Chico Bloom is a professor at Rutgers Robert Wood Johnson Medical School in neuroscience and cell biology and pediatrics. He's been an amazing asset to the ABC board, especially related to neurodevelopmental disorders and relevant discussions thereupon. We hope that we can continue consulting with Dr. Chico Bloom, and we are going to ask if he might consider serving as an ABC Emeritus Board Director. So thanks so much, Manny. Now, going to the next slide, you'll see the current ABC board members are listed, and I wanted to particularly introduce incoming officers and board members and our new advocacy committee chair. So first off, I want to say that we have a new position within our board, and that's the position of vice chair. And so we're really delighted that Mark Raisnick, who was the former secretary and advocacy committee chair, is assuming this position. Welcome aboard, Mark. We're also really thrilled to welcome Bobby Hegarty as our new secretary and Leslie Ritter as our new advocacy committee chair. So we're excited about these new appointments. I also want to say that we have new board members. And let me start from the top in alphabetical order. First, we have Josie Cooper, and she's the executive director of Alliance for Patient Access. Welcome, Josie. We have Damian Fair, and he's a professor in the Department of Pediatrics at the University of Minnesota School of Medicine. He was nominated by ABC board member OHSU, Oregon Health Science University. Let us also welcome Theanne Griffith. She's an assistant professor in the Department of Physiology and Membrane Biology at UC Davis, and she was nominated by our ABC member, Northwest Noggin. Welcome aboard also to Gentry Patrick. Dr. Patrick is a professor in the neurobiology section in the Division of Biological Sciences at UCSD, and he was nominated by ABC member Cure Alzheimer's Fund. Then, finally, let me welcome Dr. Madhukar Trivedi, and he's a physician and the founding director in the Center of Depression Research and Clinical Care at the Betty Jo Hay and the Betty Jo Hay Distinguished Chair of Mental Health at UT Southwestern Medical Center. We look forward to working with each and every one of our new board members. So now we're going to be introducing our new ABC members, and here I'm going to turn it over to our Vice Chair, Mark Raisnick. Mark, take it away. Not hearing you, Mark. Maybe you're on mute.
Of course I'm on mute.
Somebody had to be the first one to do that.
Isn't that pro forma for Zoom these days?
Absolutely.
Okay. Well, we have a number of new members and who have joined with us this past year, and we're thrilled to welcome each one of them. Since only this small group is appearing on video, what I'd love for each one of you to do, as I mention your name, is indicate who's representing you on the chat, so we can all say hello. And the nonprofit members who have joined are the Cerebral Palsy Research Network, the Cohen Veterans Bioscience, Combined Brain, Focused Ultrasound Foundation, Haystack Project, Hope for HIE, INAD Cure Foundation, LEAD Coalition, Leaders Engaged on Alzheimer's Disease, Pharma, SYNGAP Research Fund, the Aneurysm and Arteriovenous Malformation Foundation, the Headache and Migraine Policy Forum, and the Mac Parkman Foundation for Adolescent Concussive Trauma. We have one academic member, the Center for Law, Brain, and Behavior at Mass General. Our corporate members, our new or rejoining corporate members, include Eli Lilly, Colonel, Praxis Medicines, Sage Therapeutics, Synovian, and Pear Therapeutics. And we're excited about working together with all of you to do everything we can to increase our ability to advocate for our members who are suffering from brain disease, and also to advocate for the ability to generate the resources that allow us to create new and more effective treatments for those patients. Welcome, everybody.
All right. I guess that takes us to the Neuroscience Champion Award presentation. And that goes to Kathy McMorris Rogers, Republican from Washington.
Dr. Rizzo, quickly, let's just we need to take a vote for the minutes from 2020.
Oh, sorry, I missed that. Go right ahead. Let's take a vote for the minutes. And who are we turning this over to?
To Bobby Hegarty, our
Bobby,
new
thank
secretary.
you. Please take it away. I missed that.
The 2020 annual membership meeting minutes were circulated to the membership with the agenda. Can I have a motion to approve these minutes? Anyone?
Bobby, it looks like Dr. Rasnick.
Okay.
Okay.
And approve a second?
I'll second it.
And approved. All? Raise your hand. Great. Okay, award time now.
Okay, Dr. Rizzo, you're up.
Yes, sorry I jumped the gun. I was so excited about the Neuroscience Champion Award. And as I was mentioning, this is a presentation to Kathy McMorris Rogers, who you see depicted on the left, and Congressman Earl Blumenauer on the right. We are ever grateful to them for their founding leadership of our bipartisan Congressional Neuroscience Caucus. And they've been at it for 10 years now. The CNC has really advanced our chance for being heard and understood at Congress on how the brain develops and functions across the lifespan and conditions of health and disease. And this educational work has paid off because it's galvanized support for national policies, programs, research on potential treatments that, as you know, can ultimately benefit the many millions of Americans who suffer with neurological disorders or mental disease. So since the Congressional Neuroscience Caucus inception 10 years ago, our co-chairs have hosted and organized an amazing 50 briefings or so and information sessions on the neuroscience research and key findings. They've collaborated on patient advocacy, physician and research organizations, and with physician research organizations to build awareness. And they've led Dear Colleague letters, they've led appropriations requests, and congressional record statements that move for support in the neurosciences. So CNC membership now includes over 35 members, and it keeps increasing yearly. I want to say that the ABC was honored to present Congresswoman McMorris Rodgers with the first Neurosciences Champion Award. She was first elected in 2004. She represents the 5th District in the state of Washington, and she serves as the ranking member of the powerful House Energy and Commerce Committee, and that oversees key health-related programs and initiatives. Congressman McMorris Rodgers was the first woman to hold the top role for her party on that committee. And as the co-chair of the CNC, she's a longtime supporter of federal funding for the NIH, inspired by her son, who has Down syndrome. Representative McMorris Rodgers is a vocal champion for individuals with neurological conditions and with disabilities. In addition to the Congressional Neuroscience Caucus, she serves as the co-chair on the Congressional Task Force for Down syndrome. The ABC is very grateful to her for continued support, and I am very pleased to share her video response to this award. Take it away.
Hi everyone, it's Kathy McMorris Rodgers from Eastern Washington. Thank you, Dr. Rizzo, for that introduction, and thank you to everyone at the American Brain Coalition for this special award. It's an honor to be recognized by such an incredible group. And for more than a decade now, we have worked together to develop new cures that save lives. So this one's extra special for me. As you know, I am proud to lead as the co-chair of the Neuroscience Caucus again this Congress. The goal of our caucus is to promote a better understanding of how the brain develops, functions, and ages. Our mission is to raise awareness about the millions of Americans afflicted with neurological disorders or mental illnesses. The good news is that thanks to American ingenuity, we're on the verge of some major life-saving breakthroughs. These breakthroughs would not only lift one of the biggest cost and care burdens on our healthcare system, but transform the lives of millions of people. People like my son, Cole, who has Down syndrome. The reality is that nearly 100% of people with Down syndrome develop the brain pathology for Alzheimer's. 1 in 3 seniors dies from Alzheimer's or another dementia. And deaths due to Alzheimer's has more than doubled over the past 20 years, increasing by 145%. But there is hope. America can win the future by leading a new era of research and development. And that's exactly what we're doing. As the lead Republican of the Energy and Commerce Committee, I'm helping advance legislation to empower more cures and medical breakthroughs, like 21st Century Cures, which was signed into law in 2016. Thanks to cures, we've advanced life-saving treatments for debilitating diseases. And we should be doing more to build on this law, with innovative policies that encourage the rest of the world to follow our leadership for more affordable life-saving drugs and treatments. With your help, our Neuroscience Caucus led again this year on the BRAIN Initiative, aimed at revolutionizing our understanding of the brain. By accelerating the development and application of innovative technologies, researchers will be able to produce a revolutionary, new dynamic picture of the brain. And this is just a start. I'm confident that with your continued help, America can win the future. We can and will spare millions of people from diseases. Thank you again for this honor. And on behalf of families everywhere who find hope in your research and advocacy work, thank you for all that you do. God bless.
Thanks, Katie. Congressman Blumenauer represents the 3rd Congressional District in Oregon. A lifelong resident of Portland and longtime friend of mine, Representative Blumenauer was first elected to the House of Representatives in 1996 and has used his time in Congress and as a member of the Ways and Means Committee to promote healthcare access and environmental issues. Of critical importance to the ABC, Representative Blumenauer has been a tireless champion for both the patients suffering from neurological and psychiatric disorders and the researchers developing the treatments and cures to mitigate the impact of these disorders. Most recently, with colleagues from the Congressional Brain Injury Task Force, Representative Blumenauer introduced the Bringing Regulatory Advances into Neuroscience, or BRAIN Act. The BRAIN Act seeks to advance the signature policy priority of the ABC, establishing a Neuroscience Center of Excellence at the FDA. I am pleased to introduce Representative Blumenauer's video acceptance, hopefully, of the Neuroscience Champion Award. Thanks.
Greetings. I'm Congressman Earl Blumenauer. I'm grateful to be honored as a neuroscience champion by the American Brain Coalition. It is a special pleasure to be alongside my Congressional Neuroscience Caucus co-chair, Congresswoman McMorris-Rodgers. This organization holds a special place in my heart. It was my friend and incoming secretary of your organization, Bobby Haggerty, who first inspired me many years ago to become more involved supporting neuroscience research in Congress, where so many decisions can be made to advance the cause. I'm proud of my partnership with Bobby because, as you know, brain health has an incredible impact on patients, families, and the entire healthcare system. The brain is the most complex 3 pounds in the universe. Neuroscience touches everything we do in Congress, every problem and every solution. But it often doesn't get the attention and funding that it deserves. In the last 10 years, I'm pleased that the Neuroscience Caucus has been able to remedy that by highlighting the important work that your community is doing and to raise awareness about the latest neuroscience research and findings. I'm grateful that groups like the American Brain Coalition exist to keep lawmakers and the public focused on these issues so they don't get pushed to the sidelines. I'm appreciative of our partnership over the years, most recently on the BRAIN Act, which would establish a Neuroscience Center of Excellence at the FDA. By focusing on the nervous system as a whole, instead of one disease or another, and centralizing existing research activities, a Center of Excellence would make the FDA more responsive in the quickly changing science while keeping patients at the forefront of the conversation. Over 40 organizations representing patients, providers, and the healthcare industry have already endorsed this legislation, a clear signal of its importance and its potential. As we work to make progress on this legislation and so many other issues, I look forward to working with you to continue building momentum around supporting neuroscience research. And once again, thank you for this honor and for all you do supporting the health of our communities. This will be in a place of honor in my office.
We look forward to continuing these relationships through the CNC. They've been useful and fruitful and exciting, and we've moved a long way with the help of Congressman Blumenauer and Congressman McMorris-Rodgers. So what I want to do now, before I turn it over to Leslie Ritter, is to introduce special congressional guests. I want to remind you of efforts to date with the ABC regarding our patient advocacy initiative. In January this year, ABC began working hard on our advocacy campaign to support the creation of the Neurosciences Center of Excellence at the FDA that I mentioned before. And this is an idea that was presented to us by several different ABC members following on the success of the Oncology Center of Excellence, which was formed a few years ago in the FDA with the original Cures Act. So in February, we dedicated our we debuted our Neuroscience Center of Excellence Advocacy Toolkit, and it included sample member alerts, a grassroots action alert, sample social media posts, congressional media talking points, and other materials that helped outline the unique needs of patients with brain diseases and the need for the Neurosciences Center of Excellence. In May this year, we had a meeting with the leaders of the FDA, including then Acting Director Janet Woodcock, the center directors, the director of the Office of Neuroscience, and articulated the need for the Neuroscience Center of Excellence. The FDA and the officials were very receptive to these issues that we raised, and they understood that there were significant unmet needs with respect to treatments for patients with brain and CNS disorders. The FDA directors indicated the need for additional resources to focus on strategic initiatives. The Cures 2.0 discussion draft was released in June. It included a section, Section 306, that directed the FDA to create 2 new centers of excellence, including one, which is relevant to us, that address diseases that are a leading cause of mortality or disability, affect at least 50 million Americans a year, and contribute to increasing healthcare costs, and for which medical products take longer to be approved. All of these, I'm sure you know, apply to brain and CNS conditions. So the ABC was naturally thrilled to support Cures 2.0 and provided comments during the comment period outlining these needs. More recently, ABC has provided a statement of support and a sign-on letter with 90 organizations supporting the BRAIN Act, which was introduced by Representatives Blumenauer, Pascrell, and Bacon from my own district. And we're excited to hear more now about Cures 2.0 and the BRAIN Act from special guests. So I'm going to turn it over to Leslie Ritter now to introduce them. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Rizzo. So we are so lucky to be joined today by 2 seasoned Capitol Hill staffers who are going to be able to share their perspectives and inside the Beltway tips with us today. So before I introduce them, just wanted to remind you that we will have a Q&A portion. And unfortunately, we're not going to be able to unmute everyone. So if you do have questions for our guest, feel free to drop those into the Q&A chat box. And we've allowed some Q&A time after each update, but want to make sure that we're addressing your questions. So I'll get right to it. So we're very excited to welcome Sherry Lou Santos, who's the Health Policy Director for Congresswoman Diana DeGette, to the call today. Representative DeGette is from Colorado's 13th District. She is a member of the House Energy and Commerce Committee and has jurisdiction over numerous health and health-related policies, including Cures 2.0. Along with her colleague from Michigan, Representative Fred Upton, Congresswoman DeGette led efforts to advance the 21st Century Cures Act, which was signed into law in 2016. That legislation was groundbreaking for so many reasons. And really, Cures 2.0 is going to be a pathway forward to kind of build on the success of Cures 1.0. So as Dr. Rizzo mentioned, the draft bill was circulated back in the summer and includes language that would pave the way for the creation of a Neuroscience Center of Excellence at the FDA. And the ABC did support this proposal and has supported this proposed piece of legislation. And we thank Congresswoman DeGette and Mr. Upton and their staff members for their work and support along the way. In particular, we want to thank Sherry Lou for her support and the conversations that we've had with her and her insights on the Cures 2.0 process. And we'd love to welcome and hear more of those insights today. So Sherry Lou, over to you.
Great. Thank you, Leslie. Thank you, Dr. Rizzo. And thank you all for being here and also inviting me to participate in today's conversation. I'm going to be super honest here. Leslie and Dr. Rizzo, you kind of took my entire spiel away. You did so well that everything that I needed to say is totally all done and said. But just to add a little bit more to what Leslie mentioned, with 21st Century Cures that passed in 2016, Like Leslie said, for those that don't or that aren't aware, it has been kind of hailed as landmark legislation that's done a lot of great work that both Representatives DeGette and Upton are extremely proud of. One of the things that folks have been saying since 2016 is really, 21st century cures is how Congress should work. Should be working in a bipartisan fashion. With Democrats and Republicans coming together to find that compromise on issues that are very important to stakeholders at the time, on issues that matter, really being sure to engage with stakeholders throughout the entire process. So Leslie mentioned she's been working with me as well as my counterpart in Representative Upton's office. And, Dr. Rizzo mentioned that you guys had started engaging in this process, not only with Congress, but also with FDA on what's really important to you all, we are hoping that the language that we landed on would be helpful. So that's just a little bit on that. The past 2.5 years has really been this really engaged stakeholder process, and that's something that both Representatives DeGette and Upton have been very proud of, both with this process as well as the first iteration of cures. So we really want to ensure that that process keeps going. Leslie mentioned next steps. What I think I can say right now is we are very excited to introduce cures imminently, is I think the word that we can use for today. And next steps on patient advocacy is really getting the word out there and ensuring, one, that we got the policy right. So Dr. Rizzo mentioned that in May y'all had conversations with FDA. And though they were receptive, the ask there was, additional resources. So we are hoping that the language, which is section 306 that we included in cures in the cures discussion draft, we are hoping that would kind of work in tandem with what would be helpful, as well as what FDA needs to really get this very important policy across the finish line. But really, your voices are very important to keep the drumbeat going, ensuring that your members of Congress are supportive and are vocally showing their support, so we can get this across the finish line.
Thank you, Sherry Lou. And I haven't seen any questions come in yet in the chat box, but I'll keep my eye open. So I'm going to take moderator's privilege here and ask the first question. So obviously, there was a lot of bipartisan support for Cures 1.0, a lot of support really across both chambers in the House and Senate. Obviously, Cures 2.0, I'm so excited to hear that it's an imminent introduction. That'll be really exciting. So obviously this is a House-led effort. Obviously ENC has primary jurisdiction. I know it's a little bit early in the process, but can you talk a little bit about how our groups can raise support on the House and Senate side, whether or not some of our champions are on committee, off committee? What's the best way for us to kind of raise support in both chambers for the provisions that are going to be in Cures 2.0?
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you for that question. Like you mentioned, 21st century cures. And though it does predate me, I've heard from both my boss and my counterpart Representative Upton's office is that, that patient advocacy push and endorsement and support is really what got 21st century cures across the finish line. So we are really hoping that continues this time around. In terms of House support, it'd be really helpful, specifically to have members co-sponsor the bill that are within ENC. However, it was kind of reflected within the discussion draft. This iteration, Cures 2.0, I think is a little bit more diverse in policy sets, and it will have a lot of other jurisdictional pieces to it. So if we're looking at folks that have kind of the gavel, it would be Energy and Commerce Committee folks, Ways and Means folks, as well as Science Committee. Though it kind of cuts across lots of different committees, but those are the folks that if we were looking to target, that would be extremely, extremely helpful to try to get support from members of those particular committees. On patient advocacy side, though, every member, is very helpful. I think I don't remember the number right now, but my counterpart mentioned it to me this morning that 21st Century Cures had over 200 co-sponsors at the time. And, you know, that just sheer volume is what triggered that importance to leadership, that this is something that many people are supportive of, and that it is important for folks on the ground. So no matter what committee, it will be important. What I can say, and Leslie, you mentioned this, that right now it's pretty much a drive within the House, specifically from representatives, to get an opt-in. But we have had some conversations internally, yes, both with Representatives Eshoo and Representative Pallone, but also we are, you know, looking to have conversations with the Senate. We've had some initial conversations prior to introduction, but I think the way Representative Upton says it is, you know, when we go to our Senate counterparts, they say, where's the language? So we are, you know, gearing up for more in-depth conversations with some of our Senate counterparts, because it is both representatives' intent to get this across the finish line sooner rather than later. So any help with Senate support would be great as well.
Perfect. Perfect. So I'm getting a couple of questions that are all centering kind of on the same topic. So is it your boss's preference, or is Cures 2.0 likely to move forward as a standalone? I know that, you know, next year is going to be really busy legislatively with the Prescription Drug User Fee Act and other user fee acts. So are you ideally wanting to move Cures 2.0 as standalone? Would it be kind of moving in a parallel path to those user fee bills once they start moving?
Yeah, I really appreciate the question. And that's, I think, one of the top questions that we've been getting. I think where we are at right now, and just kind of with the precedent that has been set with 21st Century Cures and kind of the street cred, if you will, that both representatives to get an opt-in have in moving, you know, a large piece of legislation forward in a bipartisan way, their intent is fully to move this as a standalone. I think, you know, some other questions are, oh, do you think Cures 2.0 can move in a different package? Do you think Cures 2.0 can move within PDUFA or the Prescription Drug User Fee Act? But I think because of the breadth of policies that we have included in Cures and that are priorities for both my boss and Representative Upton, it doesn't quite fit one other package or another. So it is our intent to move forward with it as a standalone package. That said, though, if there are other opportunities to, you know, include Cures in a different package, it's definitely not we're saying no to that, but this is our primary goal.
That sounds great. And in terms of street cred, I think you win today for street cred for best background. It's really getting us into the holiday spirit. I love it. Another question
I had a
coming.
question.
I was going to say, Dr. Resnick, you have your hand raised.
Yeah. Very quickly, one, I guess you would like members of this group to contact, after you drop this, people that we know on energy and commerce, and then move to the other committees after that. That's one. But two, I'm just wondering if you could give a frank assessment. I mean, Cures 1 occurred in a background where you had a much more of a bipartisan House than you do now. So what are the prospects for getting significant numbers of Republicans on this?
That's a really good question. I really wish my counterpart were here to kind of speak to his side of the aisle, and I don't want to speak out of turn here, but we are definitely very hopeful. We've been having conversations both externally, you know, with folks like you all for the past 2.5 years, as well as internally on the Hill about, you know, the policies that we have here, as well as our intent to move forward. What I can say is there are already certain provisions within Cures 2.0 that are already bipartisan in nature, because we have partnered with other, you know, bipartisan teams and duos on their policies, given we don't need to reinvent the wheel if somebody already is driving. So I think there's already some, you know, bipartisan support that we are very excited to look to, but I don't want to say one way or another. What I can say is for 21st Century Cures, timing of that was pretty contentious timing. It was, to my understanding, one of the last bills that, you know, President Obama at the time had signed into law, and in a pretty contentious political climate. So to representative to get an Upton, this climate is kind of no different. You know, they're really banking on the policies, and the policies, you know, are true to the need of folks, given that we have had a completely, you know, engaged stakeholder process. So we're hoping that that can speak for itself.
Great. So we have a question in the chat. So you had mentioned that Ways and Means and members of the Science Committee. So for groups on the call today, we should assume that those people targeting for co-sponsorship of Cures 2.0 is something that we should really be prioritizing, apart from energy and commerce.
Yeah, I would absolutely say that. One of the pieces that we, you know, tried to focus on this time around is the delivery side of things. So, you know, the spirit of Cures has always been to discover health innovations, whether they're therapies, whether they're devices, you know, whatever it is. So discover the discovery side of things, to develop all of those pieces, and then to deliver all those pieces to patients. In our time that we've been engaging with folks, as well as, you know, since 2016, since the passage of 21st Century Cures, we had found that great, you know, there's such groundbreaking innovation in the health space, but it's not always getting to patients. So what is the use of that? And given that, you know, missing component for delivery, the CMS side of things in terms of coverage and access, we have found to be a very important piece of this conversation, which does fall into at least some of those pieces within the Ways and Means jurisdiction. So it would be very helpful to get some of their support and endorsement.
Great. So I'm getting a couple of questions around ARPA-H. So I'm going to try to condense them into one question. So will the Cures 2.0 language include authorizing language for ARPA-H in light of the legislation introduced by Representative Asha? And building on that, what is the Congresswoman's position, if she has one, on ARPA-H's placement, whether it's in HHS, NIH, and what are the conversations been around that?
Yeah, absolutely. So both Representatives DeGette and Upton, you know, have long been transparent about their position and priority to include authorizing language for ARPA-H in Cures 2.0. We did include within the discussion draft a kind of request for information on ARPA-H to ensure that we got the language right. We will be including authorizing language for ARPA-H within this iteration of Cures 2.0, and that will be based off conversations we've had with lots of folks, especially folks in the research space, but also with the administration, given that this is one of President Biden's priorities, as well as other members of Congress who have been interested in this topic. So yes, despite Representative Ashu's bill that she introduced a few weeks ago, we are moving forward with our iteration of ARPA-H authorizing language within Cures 2.0.
Great. And so this is a good question for this group. Is there any media content that ABC membership can receive and share with our networks once you introduce? And what's the best way, apart from signing on to letters and things like that, for groups to get more involved in getting the word out and building support for Cures?
Yeah, absolutely. I really appreciate that question. We actually are going to have a press toolkit that is going to come out. So whether, you know, folks can speak on behalf of their organizations, that would be great. There will be pieces within the press toolkit for that. Or if folks want to speak individually, you know, on social media or such, we do have some pieces within our press toolkit for that. If there's actually somebody within ABC I could send that to once we're ready, because there's a lot of you guys, that'd be great for me to know so that I can send that over. But I really appreciate that question, and any vocal support in any shape, way, or form would be extremely appreciated.
Yeah, and I'll go ahead and throw both myself and Katie under the bus. So if you want to go ahead and send that to either Katie or I, we can go ahead and get it out to the membership. So this is a great question. So there are a number of disease areas that want a center of excellence. So how can we ensure that neuroscience would be a leading priority in getting the center of excellence? I know you and I talked a lot about, you know, what is in cures and what is in Section 306, but would love your thoughts on that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think maybe a little bit of history might be helpful here. So with 21st century cures, given that that was kind of the impetus for the Oncology Center of Excellence over at FDA that, has been found to be, very helpful and successful in what they are able to get done. The way that it was worded in 21st century cures was actually pretty broad, right? So the intent that Representatives DeGette and Upton had was to ensure that FDA had enough to stand up something like a center of excellence, or what we are terming as intercenter institutes for that collaborative piece. But really it was folks on the ground, stakeholders, organizations, patient advocacy groups that followed up with conversations with FDA to ensure that that is the direction FDA took that really, got that center of excellence across the finish line. Mm-hmm. So that is kind of the model we're trying to follow this time around as well.
No, that is fantastic. And I know that you have been super generous with your time, Sherry Lou. I am not seeing any other questions in the chat box, but as soon as the bill is introduced, we're happy to kind of get the word out and help you. Looking forward to getting that toolkit. Would you have any last words or things that you would need from the ABC membership before we let you go?
I don't think so at this time. I'm sure I will follow up when I remember in 10 minutes what would be helpful. But I really appreciate, the time you all have taken to date in really engaging with us to make sure that we are forming the policies that are super helpful. Really appreciate the time you all took today to have this conversation with me, and really looking forward to continuing our work together.
Thank you so much, Sherry Lou, and looking forward to talk to you soon. And in 10 minutes, if you remember something, we'll still be on the call. So feel free to email us and we'll just relay it to the group.
All right. Thanks so much, everyone. Have a good one.
Thank you. Have a good day. So next, I'm happy to introduce Asha Samuel. So Asha is the legislative assistant for Representative Blumenauer that covers health and other issues. And we've talked a great deal about his work in the neuroscience community. As you know, Asha helps lead the efforts around the Neuroscience Caucus and works to advance brain health issues in the House of Representatives. She actually joined Representative Blumenauer's office within the last few months and immediately came an integral part of leading the introduction and the work around HR 5435, the BRAIN Act that we've been mentioned a couple of times today, that was introduced by Representative Blumenauer and his colleagues, Representative Pascrell and Bacon of the Congressional Brain Injury Task Force. So thank you so much, Asha, for the work that you've done already, and we look forward to hearing about you around the hearing from you rather around the BRAIN Act and how we can get more involved and help you with this effort.
Yeah, of course. It's so great being with all of you here today. And I know you've already talked extensively about how much Congressman Blumenauer cares about brain health and ABC and these issues, but I will once again reiterate that support. And the nice thing about the technical difficulties of not being able to play a speech is that I get to steal lines from it, and you can think that he copied me instead of the other way around. But I know that some of these issues sometimes get pushed to the side and they don't necessarily always get the attention that they really need, considering the impact that these issues have had on patients, on families. And I'm really grateful for groups like ABC for kind of continually putting that at the forefront of our minds and being a great partner for the CNC to be able to raise these issues with other members. And I know that we've done a lot of great work together, with the BRAIN Initiative, with this BRAIN Act. For the path forward on this, I think it's largely tied to what the whole conversation has been so far. I'm really excited to see the introduction of Cures 2.0 and how we can make one of those COEs a neuroscience one. And I think, as we talk about the impact of neurological disorders on patients and on the economy, I think that number, that $1.5 trillion impact, I think is a great case for it. And any efforts that you guys can make to reach out to your members of Congress and kind of raise awareness for that would be great. I'm looking forward to working with, Sherry Liu and Energy and Commerce and seeing how we can, keep neuroscience as a priority going forward. And I'm looking forward now that the bill is getting introduced to be able to send a letter to kind of reiterate that support. So I will be in touch as we figure out all of that. But I'm just grateful for all the work that you're doing and how great of a resource you all have been for me as I got started. Working on this bill has been a great crash course and way to kind of brush up on my boss's record and all of the great work that you've already been doing.
There is nothing like a bill introduction to give you a crash course in everything that you thought you knew was a component of your job.
Exactly.
So I know that the ABC has issued a letter of support, a statement of support for the BRAIN Act, but we do have a couple of new groups that are joining us for the first time. So maybe you could just broadly talk through the bill and what it does.
Yeah, so the bill establishes this Neuroscience Center of Excellence and let me see if I can get the wording right, a neuroscience working group. It's like a translational working group to translate those results into action items and I guess research. And when I'm saying action items, I mean research, product development, et cetera, that really keeps patients at the forefront and making sure that when we're doing this, when we're talking about research, that we're really thinking about the patient experience. And I think, when we talk about research broadly, that's really what we need to be thinking about, right? That these are people that are going through things, and as much as we can all sit around and talk about how great policy there is, making sure that it's reflected by the patient experience is really kind of, I think, what the heart of this bill is.
Thank you for that. So just a quick reminder for those on the call, there is quite a few of us on the call, so I can't actually raise hand or unmute you unless you are a panelist. But if you do have questions, please drop them into the chat, put them in the chat, the Q&A box, so we can get to them. So I think we've mentioned Cures 2.0 and how it's going to be introduced imminently. So that will be a large part of, how the BRAIN Act moves. But I feel like we can't also acknowledge the Build Back Better Act and the momentum around that. So between Build Back Better and appropriations and, everything that Congress has to get done by end of year, what path forward do you see for the BRAIN Act, and how can we be helpful specifically to you when there's everything in the world going on in Congress, making sure that this gets the attention it needs?
Yeah, it's funny because I think that's my automatic question too. It's always like, well, there's all of these big things going on and it's what the news is talking about. And, my parents are calling me and they're like, what's that bill with a child tax credit? I'm like, you don't even have a kid that's eligible for it anymore. So I think that sometimes it makes me nervous too. But I think the interesting thing for me from the perspective of a health staffer is that despite all of this, despite how much healthcare there is in Build Back Better, people are still talking about Cures 2.0 for months now. In so many meetings, people are bringing it up. They're interested in our opinion. They're interested in what's going to happen. And I think, maybe I'm just being a little too optimistic, but I think that across the healthcare industry, there's a need for this. And I think people see that and they're willing to engage in that. And I think I personally feel like that's kind of the momentum we need to use to drive this bill forward. I think that there's a lot of people that understand that this kind of investment in research and, in our various agencies is really important. And I think they're willing to do it. So I think however we can engage with other partners and other members to kind of highlight that, there is a need for this and there are patients asking for this. And I think that can really drive a lot of the momentum, just like what Sherry Liu was saying before.
No, that's great. And I think, hearing from how this impacts people in their districts who are living with these conditions and having all these unmet needs out there, the stories really, really drive the need for this. So totally agree there. So I will ask you kind of the same question I asked Sherry Liu. So what do you see in terms of pathway forward on the House side, Senate side? Are you working, you mentioned you had talked around to Sherry and Mark, who is Representative Upton's health staffer who's working on this. So how can we help And what are the paths forward in the House? And do you have any plans? Are you talking to any Senate colleagues who might be interested in introducing companion legislation?
You know, I'm planning on working with Energy and Commerce to see if there's a path forward on the bill, whether it's, you know, somehow folding it into CURES 2.0 or, you know, moving it alongside it, kind of in the same spirit. And I think having those same conversations with Senate colleagues, I think especially once CURES 2.0 is introduced and, you know, you kind of get the full picture of what we're trying to get at, I think is the most likely path forward there.
Great. So right now the ask is really helping build co-sponsors and support for the bill.
Yes, that would be great.
Great. And I know that we have a bunch of organizations on the call today that will help with that. So here is a question that's come in. So we are grateful to your boss for his work alongside Representative McMorris-Rogers to lead the Dear Colleague in support of the BRAIN initiative. And as a result of those efforts, we were thrilled to see that the House included $612 million in the labor HHS appropriations bill for the BRAIN initiative. The Senate's labor HHS report includes $640 million for BRAIN initiative. Do you think that the House appropriators would be willing to go above the amount that they marked in the bill to provide even more support for the BRAIN Act or for the BRAIN initiative?
I'm hoping to connect with, you know, some appropriation staff and see what the appetite is. But I personally, maybe I'm being too optimistic, but I feel like when the Senate puts out the larger number, I think maybe there's more of a chance for it to happen on the House side. But I'm hoping to have those conversations, you know, especially with the deadline coming up. Maybe we'll be able to see a full package come out, and that would be a really great investment. And I think, you know, I'll say it over and over. I think people have really seen just how important an investment in research can be. And obviously a COVID vaccine is different than addressing chronic conditions, but I think it's all in the same spirit. And there's an appetite for research, in my opinion.
Great. And we have a thank you coming in from Diana Fellner. As she says, more of a thanks comment than a question. As one of the groups and conditions who only has a few approved treatments, it's so important to ensure that those conditions will be able to be prioritized within a neuroscience center of excellence to ensure this disparity can be addressed. Thank you for including a reference to the need for treatments and conditions for those who desperately need treatments. So just wanted to make sure you saw that.
No, of course, thank you. And I think, you know, that just kind of highlights the need for this legislation.
Great. And I think we have, if you have a couple minutes for maybe one or two more questions.
Yeah.
Okay, great. So how is the proposed plan for what is the proposed plan for the working group? How will it be established and administered? And brain health is vast and there's a lot of players, and who will be given a seat at the table for that working group that you mentioned earlier?
I believe so. I should have had this pulled up already. I know that there is specific language in the legislation. I think it's 8 members, and there's like specific seats for each thing. I apologize that I don't remember it off the top of my head, but I can follow up with someone from ABC to get that information out.
Yes, if you just want to go ahead, if you want to email me or Katie, we can go ahead and send that out to the rest of the group.
Perfect.
Okay. I think this, so I think the question is anyone not supporting this, you know, oh, I guess in terms of the question is, are groups who may support other neuroscience or other diseases for centers of excellence, do you perceive any pushback on the BRAIN Act or establishing a neuroscience center of excellence, given that there are other diseases and conditions who would like one of those?
So far I haven't heard any pushback. I don't know if that is there isn't necessarily the organization around other diseases yet, or if there just actually is no pushback. I guess I'll speculate and say that I wouldn't be surprised either way. I think that obviously neuroscience kind of encompasses a larger a wide range of diseases. So I think that we can make a solid argument about why it should be prioritized. But I understand that everyone is doing their own advocacy, and we'll just roll with the punches when they come.
Sounds great. And so we do have a question here, I think that gets along that. I think it's more ABC related. Can ABC, about priorities for Neurocenter of Excellence versus other pathologies, can the American Brain Coalition help generate, update more current annual costs for the psych neuropathologies? I think the answer to that is yes. I think, but would love to hear from your perspective. Are there any data figures or stories or information that we can give or provide to you to kind of help sell this while your boss is kind of looking around for co-sponsors and working with the different committees of jurisdiction? What can we do and provide to help make the case?
Yeah, I mean, I think updated numbers on economic cost, on numbers of patients involved, affected are always useful. I think for me and my public health brain, I always appreciate the stories that, kind of are multidisciplinary. So when we talk about healthcare, it's never just about one single patient in one single situation, right? It's about how that affects all these other areas of our lives. So I think that there's a lot of impact. I think there are a lot of members that'll be really impacted by kind of different stories, just hearing about what patients have gone through, what families have gone through, how that affects, everything from their healthcare journey to how they put food on the table to how they're able to work every day. I think that there's a lot of different, those different types of stories will definitely have a lot of impact.
Great. I expect your email inbox will be just exploding after this call with those different data points. But it looks like we have not a lot of questions, just a lot of comments thanking you for your work, thanking your boss for his continued commitment to neuroscience and the Neuroscience Caucus. Do you have any last words of wisdom for us or any other things that you'd like to leave us with today?
I think I got the easy end of the stick, because I can just basically say everything that Sherry Lou said. I'll just echo it. I think that type of advocacy will be really great, and I just really appreciate all your work and your partnership for the Neuroscience Caucus, and I'm looking forward to much more in the future.
Well, thank you so much. I love the positive energy and the positive vibes moving into what's going to be quite a busy next couple of weeks. So thank you so much for your time today, Asha, and we look forward to connecting with you soon.
Of course, thank you.
Great.
So thank you very much, Leslie. You are very articulate and thoughtful, and we are so grateful that you're helping us with our advocacy. And thanks so much to Sherry Lou and to Asha for their presentations and support of this impactful legislation for Cures 2.0 and the BRAIN Act. We're going to move on now, and I'm going to turn it over now to Craig Obie, because we're going to have a panel discussion. It's called Train and Retain International Talent to Enhance Access to Care. It's an important issue. Craig is the Chief of Government Relations for the American Psychiatric Association, and he's a current ABC board member, and he's going to lead this timely discussion. Craig, please take it away.
Thanks so much, Dr. Rizzo, and good afternoon, everyone, or I guess good morning if you're on the West Coast. So very pleased to be able to kick off this panel today. Many people don't realize the importance of international medical graduates, also known as IMGs, to healthcare across the United States. IMGs, who are physicians who complete medical school outside the US and Canada, make up 25% of licensed physicians in the US and constitute a significant portion of the workforce for various specialties, including psychiatry and neurology. They constitute, for psychiatry, 30% of practicing psychiatrists and 33% of residents across the US. And it's no secret that shortages of physicians are already significant and other professionals, and they're expected to grow. The Association of American Medical Colleges estimates shortages of primary care physicians as high as 31,000 by the year 2025, with estimated shortages for non-primary care physicians ranging as high as almost 64,000 by that time. For a specialty like psychiatry, HRSA estimates this will translate into a shortage of more than 12,000 psychiatrists by 2030. By 2025, demand for neurologists is expected to exceed supply by about 19%. Without IMGs, of course, these shortages would be even worse. And the COVID pandemic has shown the impact of shortages of physicians and other providers on access to care, as well as burnout among healthcare professionals. All state licensing jurisdictions require a graduate of a foreign medical school to complete 1 to 3 years of accredited US or Canadian graduate medical education before licensure. IMGs in residency typically work in the US under what's called a J-1 visa. And historically, that kind of visa required them to return to their home countries for 2 years before they could then continue their careers in the US after residency, if that's what they wanted to do. The only exception to that requirement is a waiver provided through the Conrad State 30 program. I originally encountered this issue in the mid-1990s as a legislative staff member handling healthcare for Senator Conrad from North Dakota. Our office had been approached by an IMG physician and hospital seeking a way for physicians like him to stay in North Dakota rather than have to return because the state was in a critical shortage situation with providers. Pretty much the entire state of North Dakota had a shortage of health professionals. State was losing 2 rural hospitals per year, couldn't staff them, and access to care was a real challenge. So we began working to develop what has become known as the Conrad State 30 program. That program allows a hospital or health center to apply to a state Department of Health and request a visa waiver for physicians who agree to practice for at least 3 years in a shortage area in return. Since we passed the provision as part of the Immigration Act Technical Corrections Bill in 1994, when my hair was a slightly different color, the Conrad 30 program has enabled thousands of highly trained physicians to practice in the US and provide much needed access to care. The program helps IMGs and the supporting institutions navigate this complex system while also boosting the workforce of physicians in rural and other medically underserved areas. But the program has never been made permanent and requires periodic reauthorizations. Current legislation, S1810, Conrad State 30 and Physician Access Reauthorization Act, is a 3-year authorization introduced by Senators Klobuchar and Collins and has 23 strongly bipartisan co-sponsors. The bipartisan House companion, HR 3541, was introduced by Representatives Branch Snyder and Don Bacon and has 77 co-sponsors. The program is presently extended through December 3rd of this year, so it's important that Congress extend the program beyond that date. Here with me to discuss why IMGs and legislation like this are so important for patient access are 3 panelists: Dr. Rizzo, who just introduced me, who's chair of neurological science at the University of Nebraska Medical Center and chair of the ABC board. Sukhjit Ahuja, chief health policy officer for the American Academy of Neurology, and Janet Heischetter, executive director of the Dystonia Medical Research Foundation. So now let me turn things back to Dr. Rizzo.
Thank you. Thank you, Craig. I want to say that the ABC and its members have a shared mission and responsibility to improve access to care for our patients with mind and brain disorders. And the reality is, as you just pointed out, there aren't enough American doctors to do that. We have pockets of vast stretches of medically underserved across the country. In my job in the Department of Neurology, Neurological Sciences at University of Nebraska Medical Center, I'm held accountable and responsible for accomplishing this mission across our region of access to care, and that includes the rural and the urban underserved. We think about our state as one that rolls 500 miles west from Omaha, where UNMC is located, and that makes it a big job. We don't have enough doctors. Helping our patients, our families, our communities, fortunately, are some of the doctors that you mentioned, Craig. And these are foreign-born physicians, and they're some of the finest, most dedicated physicians that you'll know. And in Nebraska, we've hired several of these smart, big-hearted doctors, and they provide world-class care to the underprivileged. And they have all kinds of conditions that are highly relevant to the ABC. The epilepsies, ataxias, multiple sclerosis, neurodegenerative disorders like Parkinson's disease and Alzheimer's, ALS, neuropathy, muscular dystrophy, strokes, tumors, major psychiatric disorders, rare disorders, any condition that you can imagine that's relevant to our American Brain Coalition. Many of these physicians, after their waivers, have stayed on beyond the 3 years that you mentioned of their obligation. And that helps us build access to world-class health care, to treatments and cures. They've helped build our workforce. You mentioned the shortage that's coming. It's already here, and particularly in the Midwest and the Upper Great Plains. We're probably 60 neurologists or so short, and we're way short on psychiatrists. So the doctors who pass through the Conrad 30 waiver program are from other nations and overseas, and they're advancing our missions, not only clinical care, but they're teaching the next generation of caregivers and scholars. So they're performing an educational mission. They're helping out with clinical and translational research to discover and disseminate the latest treatments and cures. And they're also very important for community outreach for the people, to the people who need our help. I want to say that they're a very diverse group, so they improve diversity. They bring new ideas and vigor. They add to the culture. They even speak languages that we don't speak, but our patients speak. So they are a really important link to our patient community. The Conrad 30 waiver program that you mentioned is at the heart of our ability to mitigate these pressing shortages and to get qualified doctors into medically underserved areas, be they rural or urban. As you mentioned, it allows the J1 foreign medical graduates to waive the 2-year foreign residence requirement and to stay with us to improve our care and our access. So we need these doctors. We need the legislation that supports these doctors. And I think this is an important discussion for us to have. Thank you.
And next we have Sukhjit. Sukhjit, you want to go ahead?
Thank you, Craig. Yes. So I'll speak for a couple of minutes on behalf of the American Academy of Neurology. So immigrant neurologists, or the international medical graduates, or IMGs, they're an important part of the US neurology workforce. More than 31% of active neurology physicians are actually international medical graduates. And over a third of neurology residents currently undergoing residency training are IMGs as well. As we know, the population of US is expected to grow by over 10% by 2034, with a 42% increase in the individuals age 65 and older, and more than 74% increase in individuals age 75 and older. And as this life expectancy continues to rise, more Americans will develop chronic neurologic conditions such as Parkinson's disease, dementia, Alzheimer's disease, etc., which require specialized care. And because of the ever-increasing prevalence of neurologic diseases, the US has a shortage of neurologists, with only about 5 neurologists per 100,000 population. And the estimated shortfall in the neurology workforce is projected to increase from 11%, which is about 18,000 neurologists in 2012, to 18% in 2025, for about 21,000, over 21,000 neurologists. As we've been living through this pandemic for the last 2 years, let's look at how the shortage of qualified neurologists is impacting the care in COVID, and especially long COVID. So as the significant impact of long COVID for millions of Americans are emerging, having a sufficient workforce that addresses the additional demand for neurologic care is critical. According to a recent study, 1/3 of patients diagnosed with long COVID may develop psychiatric or neurologic disorders within 6 months. including depression, anxiety, strokes, and dementia. And the same study found that among those COVID-19 patients who were admitted to ICU, the incidence of developing a psychiatric or neurologic disorder increases to 46%. Given the magnitude of COVID-19 cases across the US, the impact of neurologic symptoms is likely enormous. And throughout this pandemic, the Academy has supported efforts to maximize flexibility for international medical graduates to enter or stay in the US. So we know that there are challenges and the issues. So what are the proposed solutions? How do we increase the number of neurologists? And there are a couple of initiatives. The first one is to expand graduate medical education. So Congress recently increased the number of Medicare-supported graduate medical education positions by 1,000 in 2021. It was a welcome change and the first increase in nearly 25 years. Building on these new positions, the Resident Physician Shortage Reduction Act of 2021 would increase the Medicare-supported GME positions by 14,000 over the next 7 years. And the second is the one that we've heard a couple of times from Dr. Rizzo and from Craig, is the reauthorization and strengthening of the Conrad 30 program. So the Conrad 30 program provides 30 waivers per state to non-US international medical graduates with the J-1 visa, allowing them to continue practicing in the US if they agree to work in a medically underserved area for 3 years. Earlier this year, the Advocacy Committee of the American Academy of Neurology elevated workforce issues as a top priority for us for 2021. And as a result, the AAN has convened and is currently leading a coalition to advocate for the continuation and expansion of the Conrad 30 program. This coalition includes key stakeholders such as the American Medical Association, American Hospital Association, and the Association of American Medical Colleges, as well as a number of other medical specialty societies. So neurology residents disproportionately rely on the Conrad 30 program to remain in the US after their training. And due to the high number of IMGs in the specialty, it's an important issue for the Academy. So the Academy supports the Conrad State 30 and Physician Access Reauthorization Act, which reauthorizes the Conrad 30 program for an additional 3 years. And this would make several key improvements to the program, including a process to gradually increase the total number of waivers per state, require additional transparency in employment contract terms, permit greater immigration flexibilities for spouses and children of participating physicians, and require an annual report from the United States Citizenship and Immigration Services to give us a sense of the annual utilization of the waivers. And then finally, it will also ease the current per country backlog and authorizes physicians who practice in underserved areas or VA affiliated facilities for 5 years. They also receive priority access within the green card system. So this issue was also an ask at our September American Academy of Neurology's third legislative summit, where AAN members met with 188 lawmakers from 44 states, and the response was fairly positive. So the Academy continues to build coalitions and provide leadership to ensure that we have a vibrant pipeline of well-qualified neurologists serving the US population. With that, I'll hand it over back to Dr. Rizzo.
Thanks, Sukhjit. Janet, go ahead.
Thanks, Craig. And I just want to begin by thanking the ABC for taking this issue on. It's a really important issue, as been outlined by prior panelists. I think from the patient advocacy group perspective, we've been hearing from our members and patients in this community that they've been, it's increasingly more difficult to get access to neurologists for all of the reasons that have already been outlined. I think with a focus recently on mental health, and certainly in the community I serve, the dystonia community, which is a rare disease community, we've been trying to focus on non-motor symptoms. So trying to create access to psychiatry as well has been very, very difficult. So we have always felt that depending on where you live in this country will dictate how fast you get a diagnosis, how soon you are able to be treated. And I think that's not just the case in this small rare dystonia community. It certainly is, we hear from other organizations as well. The wait time to see a neurologist is increasing. And wait time just really isn't just a matter of convenience. Studies have shown that when a Parkinson's disease patient is actually seen by a movement disorder neurologist, they're less likely to have a fall than if they're seen by just their primary care physician. We know that that it is increasingly, as I said, increasingly more difficult to get into a clinic, and that's a huge concern for us. In addition to making sure that patients have access to physicians who can diagnose and treat, we're also concerned about having internationally medical graduates and not being able to continue to do their research. As Dr. Rizzo talked about, the state of things, it's very challenging for these dedicated physician scientists to be able to do their research. So we have an immediate concern about access to good neurological and psychological care for our patients, and more of a long-term concern about research focus. And both of these really are part of the mission of most patient advocacy organizations. So again, I want to thank ABC for taking this on. We're really looking at this to educate our members so that all of our patient advocacy groups are aware of this concern. And I'll turn it back, Craig, to you for discussion and questions.
Great, thanks, Janet. Thanks to all our panelists. And please, if you would put your questions into the chat or the Q&A, then we will do our best to respond to them. Let me just kick things off with a question generally. So we've talked about the fact that IMGs are a critical piece of the access pie. What's the story with how many physicians we're actually training in this country? And are we training enough?
Well, this is Matt, and I really don't have the figures, but I think we're not training enough, and maybe we're not training enough of the right type. We need to bring more physicians into neurology. We need to bring more physicians into psychiatry. There are pressures, particularly in psychiatry. I think payment for services is a key issue, and there is so much freight that comes with a psychiatric diagnosis, and we know that psychiatric diseases are diseases and there's still stigma attached to them. States don't seem to be willing to put as much money as needed, or don't have the money to support the clinical care. We have lots of psychiatry patients who are coming into the emergency room for care. They should be seen and followed by somebody, but there aren't enough physicians. So I think there aren't enough psychiatrists, and there aren't enough neurologists, and there aren't enough doctors in general. I don't have the figures in front of me. I wonder if Dr. Ahuja does.
Well, yeah, I'll tell you, for neurology specifically, as I mentioned, in the next 4 years, we'll have a shortage of about 18%. So the hard number is about 22,000 neurologists. And neurology is, I think, about 5 or 6% of the US medical workforce. So you can imagine if one specialty is going to lack 22,000 specialists or neurologists, then if you're talking holistically, you're probably talking about hundreds of thousands of physicians shortage, which is not an overstatement. I think it's going to be a huge shortage.
Yeah, I think, again, the demand right now is greater than the supply. And it's only going to get worse, as we are all talked about. I mean, baby boomers are hitting these, and others. So I think we're in a crisis now.
The numbers of applicants we seem to have coming through residency seems to indicate a great interest You know, we have 6 slots for residents and we got over 700 applications. That's a lot of applications, but it might be an artifact of of our not being able to get together anymore, and doesn't cost much to get on a Zoom. So there is that. On the other hand, I think that there are some disincentives to becoming a doctor now. Young people may hear in the media how awful it is to have an onslaught of patients who have COVID, to have hospitals that have virtually become critical care units throughout. The work is very hard. The work is endless. And the atmosphere of care is not as good as it used to be. There's a lot of anger from patients and families. There are controversies about masks. You know about all of this. It's just the way things are these days. But we need more doctors. We need people who have thick skins and have big hearts to go and become physicians.
Well, and I think Dr. Rizzo, to your point, I mean, there obviously there is some burnout. We're all seeing burnout. We're reading about it. IMGs are ready, willing, and really want to serve in this country. And, you know, the system is set up to put up barriers for many of them to be able to stay. So it's a real problem.
Well, I was going to go a step before that. I mean, it's very difficult for the IMGs to come to US in the first place, to even apply for the residency applications. And if you look at the whole process of going through the ECFMG certification and what's involved there, where you have to come to US to take a step, you may or may not have the resources. Then you go through the whole application process and the residency interviews, etc. It's a very long and arduous process. And then you get to a stage where many institutes and academic centers are not really interested in sponsoring a physician for H-1B because the process is very difficult, very time consuming, resource intensive. The other option is to the one we've talked about, the J-1 visa, which is also a very time consuming process, but at least a physician gets to stay in the US if they go into the underserved area for 3 years. But while we're talking about this, we're talking about the physicians who come there. What we are missing is those physicians who want to go into research. They have a very, very difficult time. Because the way the system is set up, you can go into clinical practice even through the J-1 visa, but by the time you're done with your J-1 visa waivers, you've already passed the age where you could apply for some grants from NIH, and you are sort of 5 to 10 years behind your peers if you are interested in academic research. So there are a number of barriers that basically compound the problem.
Right, and NIH has some limitations on who can apply. You have to have a formal residency, residence, which is also, you know, a factor, I think, for many of these really dedicated IMGs who, I mean, we already know that there's a decrease in the last 10 years of early stage investigators getting funded. So again, we have an immediate issue and a more long-term issue that we need to be working on.
So pose a question in the last minute. Should the Conrad 30 become the Conrad 40 or the Conrad 50 or the Conrad 60?
Yes, there is a provision here where they're going to gradually increase the total number of waivers per state that is proposed in this legislation that Craig talked about, the S1810 and the companion HR 3541. So that there is a provision for that. As the demand increases, they can gradually increase the number of waivers.
The bill would take it up to 35 per state, I believe. So is there opposition to this? We're talking about the need here. So who is anyone saying we shouldn't do this?
Well, down from the patient advocacy community, I can tell you that. I mean, but this is a muddy issue, right? And it's very complex. And I you know, again, applaud ABC for taking this on. But, you know, we've been advised when we talk about this, that we talk about it as a visa issue, not as an immigration issue, because immigration is sort of a lightning rod issue in this country right now. But it's an issue. You can call it whatever you want to, but it's an issue. Well,
and I would say in an era of enormous partisanship, just take a look at the list of co-sponsors of the Senate bill. It is amazing the bipartisan support, across the spectrum politically for that bill. And I think that speaks volumes, frankly, to the need and the recognition of the need for access here. I just want to be sure people see there are a couple comments in the chat just about issues of burnout and about access here, and seconding echoing what Janet and others have talked about in terms of access. Other thoughts on any of that?
I think this has been a great discussion, and I'm not sure if, Janet, we're sort of getting poised or need to sign on to anything right now. I know Senator Klobuchar was discussing legislation back in May, and
I think we're looking, ABC is looking to the Advocacy Committee to sort of formalize some recommendations, and then we would communicate that out to membership.
okay, so work in progress. Good discussion to help catalyze and advance our understanding, and I guess the message is stay tuned. So thank you very much. Craig, do you want to wrap up?
I just want to thank the panel. I think this is an issue where ABC is happy to, we're all able, happy to answer questions anyone has after this. So feel free to reach out to us individually or through ABC, and happy to discuss all of this, because this is an important issue. One other thing I would mention actually is Sukhjit referenced the provision last year that added 1,000 slots. There is in the Build Back Better legislation right now an additional 4,000 slots for physicians. So that's another one to keep your eye on.
Thank you, everybody. Really appreciate this discussion. It's important, and access to care, of course, is one of the mantras of the ABC, and this goes right in that direction. So we're going to move next, shift gears a little bit, to an Advocacy Committee report. And Leslie Ritter, our Advocacy Committee Chair, is on. So Leslie, please take it away.
Sounds good. So I will move through this pretty quickly. I know we've had a good discussion today around the Neuroscience Center of Excellence and Cures 2.0, but just to kind of bring everybody up to speed on what we've been working on. So ABC has been active. There's been numerous sign-on statements and other legislative efforts of our members. ABC has provided our own statements in the past few months on Dr. Collins's retirement announcement from NIH. We issued a statement endorsing the speedy nomination on confirmation of a permanent FDA commissioner. So excited to see that there's been progress made in that arena in the past week or so. We've issued statements supporting biomedical research funding for current and upcoming fiscal years. So we heard from both Sherry Luda and Asha about the appropriation cycle and how that's kind of going to be next on the congressional agenda. In terms of the online Legislative Action Center, we continue to utilize our online center, which allows our members to easily contact their members of Congress. And so happy to report that that is still ongoing. We are still seeing people utilize that. We've had Advocacy 101, a broadcast series. So earlier this year, ABC teamed up with the American Neurological Association in presenting a broadcast series to help advocates really at all levels successfully navigate the halls of Congress. We know sometimes, especially in this virtual season that we're all in, it's kind of hard to help people figure out what that process actually looks like. So these 3 short broadcasts can be found on ABC's website. So feel free to utilize those and you sending those out to your members or people who you think would benefit from those. Everyone's kind of, learning off the curve in terms of virtual meetings and best practices and going back to in-person meetings. So hope those can be of use for you there. So, and we heard that the Congressional Neuroscience Caucus has hosted a stream of briefings. In March, on March 17th, there was a briefing on neurodevelopmental disorders, the challenges and opportunity. ABC, along with members Autism Speaks, the American Academy of Neurology, and the Cerebral Palsy Research Network, and the Society for Neuroscience, all together hosted a briefing that examined the critical need to improve our understanding of what causes neurodevelopmental disorders and some new approaches to treatment and prevention. On May 25th, a path forward, identifying solutions for recognized gaps in traumatic brain injury diagnostics and treatment. So this was a really important briefing that ABC teamed up with Cohen Veterans Biosciences in hosting a joint congressional, it was a joint briefing of the Congressional Neuroscience Caucus and the Congressional Brain Injury Task Force, which included a panel of experts presenting findings from the Brain Trauma Blueprint of 2019, State of the Science Summit on TBI, and recent roadmap recommendations outlining the identified gaps across research and identifying potential solutions for progress. So really important work there. The Brain Initiative Alliance. So ABC is thrilled to have joined the Brain Initiative Alliance this year. The Brain Initiative Alliance has both federal and non-federal members, and their mission is to coordinate and facilitate communications from its members related to the Brain Initiative. So ABC has been working with the Alliance in coordination of a Congressional Brain Initiative briefing on June 21st. So I moved through that pretty quickly. We can follow up with a written report if we need to, but does anyone have any questions around some advocacy committee initiatives? If not, I can always defer to Lyle, who's up next to give us, to Lyle Dennis, our ABC's legislative consultant, to provide us with a Washington update. So if I get any questions that I can't answer, my goal in life is just to turn it over to Lyle. So I'm not seeing any in the chat. So Lyle, I will turn it over to you.
Okay, thanks, Leslie. And my goal in life is to defer any hard questions to Meg Riley and Becca Branham, who work with me on ABC and who are on this call. So we'll just keep moving it down the road. Thanks, Leslie. We're certainly looking forward to your chairmanship of the Advocacy Committee. We've enjoyed working with Mark for a number of years and looking forward to moving ahead. This has been, my opinion, a really good meeting so far. A lot of interesting discussion. A lot of it centered around the Neuroscience Center of Excellence, which is a very high priority, and how that intersects with Cures 2.0 and the BRAIN Act. So I'm going to go in a different direction here, and I'm going to talk about funding issues, which if you thought the other stuff was complicated and in an uncertain path, you're going to see even more of that here, unfortunately. So let me level set this way. We are currently operating, we meaning the federal government, all of us here in America, are operating under a continuing resolution that runs through December 3rd. The short description of a continuing resolution is you keep doing what you were doing last year, but you can't do anything new. So the government is funded in what is now a month and a half into FY22 at FY21 levels. So it's effectively a budget cut based on inflation. The FY22 legislation, appropriations legislation, there are 12 appropriations bills, 0 are enacted. 7 are passed in the House, including Labor HHS, which has most of the programs that we discuss. None have passed the Senate. There are a couple, 3 out of committee in the Senate. I'm not going to throw a lot of numbers at you, but I just want to give you some parameters here for what we're seeing in the past House bills and House bill and the released but not even voted upon Senate bills or Senate bill. The House is showing a $3.5 billion increase for what I'm going to call legacy NIH. That is to say the 27 institutes and centers and the Office of the Director at NIH. 3.5 billion this year above last year. The Senate, a little lower than that, 2.7 billion. Only in Washington is a difference of $800 million, a little bit, but it's a little lower. 2.7 billion increase for legacy NIH in the Senate bill. The 3.5 billion increase in the House bill is interesting because, and this is where this number came from. For those of you who've been around a while, you'll remember the period from FY 98 through FY 2003 in which Congress doubled the NIH budget over 5 years. FY 2003 was the high watermark, and that was the end of the 5-year doubling. If the $3.5 billion increase goes through, we will now be back to a purchase power level, adjusting for inflation at NIH, equal to what it was in 2003. Because what happened after 2003 was a series of either flat funding or very small increases that were less than the rate of biomedical research and development inflation. So the result of that was a steady loss of purchase power until about the last 6 or 7 years. And then Congress kind of reinvigorated its support, and we've seen steady increases in NIH. So if we are able to achieve a $3.5 billion increase, it's good to know we'll be back to where we were 19 years ago, but it will give us something further to build on for the future. Two other interesting things in the appropriations process. One is you heard mention earlier of the BRAIN initiative, of course, a specialized initiative at NIH working to develop new tools for brain research. The House is at $612 million in that for next year, and the Senate is at $640 million. This is a rare area where the Senate has appropriated more than the House. I think it was Asha from Mr. Blumenauer's office who indicated that in general, when the Senate puts up more money than the House quickly cedes to the Senate and goes along with the higher number. And that is true. But there will be a rate limiting factor here, which will be what the allocations end up for each of the 12 subcommittees, and those numbers are not set yet. So I wanted to mention that in terms of the BRAIN initiative. And then the other big area, and this came up once or twice earlier, is ARPA-H, the Advanced Research Projects Agency for Health, patterned after DARPA, the Defense Advanced Research Project Agency, which has been around since 1958. There is now an ARPA-E for energy, and President Biden, starting back when he was candidate Biden, has been proposing an ARPA-H structure since basically around early 2016. The president's budget asked for $6.5 billion for ARPA-H, an agency that doesn't exist and is not authorized at this point. The House bill included $3 billion for ARPA-H. The Senate bill includes $2.4 billion for ARPA-H. So the numbers have come down from what the administration requested in their budget request that came out in May. But in both cases, what is going to be needed in addition to the appropriation will be an authorization bill. Sherry Lou talked about Cures 2.0, and that they put a placeholder in there, essentially a request for information. And I know ABC has responded to that, and I know many of your groups have responded to that as well, as to what you would like to see in an ARPA-H bill. Just to make things even a little more confusing, the Health Subcommittee chair, Congresswoman Anna Eshoo from California, has filed her own authorization bill that would put ARPA-H in HHS, not in the NIH. And there are arguments, both ways, but all of this is going to need to get sorted out before there can be any real effort to create and move an ARPA-H style agency, whether it's in the NIH or at HHS. So those are kind of the big issues that we're dealing with on the appropriation side. There are other things as well, and I want to mention, I want to tie back into the NCOE, the Neuroscience Center of Excellence discussion, just a little bit here, because as you heard in some of that conversation, FDA, when we met with Dr. Woodcock and the heads of the 3 centers, and the head of their neuroscience program and several other senior officials at FDA, they made it very clear that they're under a lot of strain, largely because of the pandemic, that they are concerned about being asked to do more and not having the resources to do it. And we frankly made a commitment at that meeting to advocate for additional resources for the FDA. Those of you who are appropriations geeks like I am know that the FDA is not funded in the Labor HHS appropriations bill, even though it's an HHS agency. It's actually funded in the agriculture appropriations bill. And there's historical reason for that. Essentially, food won out over drugs back in the day when this was all created. So we are prepared. This will be an FY23 issue, I'm quite certain at this point. And we are prepared to meet our commitment and to advocate vociferously for that. But that's going to be down the road a little bit. First, we've got to get it authorized and enacted and funded, I should say, and then we'll be ready to go on that. So I'm going to stop there. Leslie, happy to turn it back to you. You can answer questions you've gotten in the meantime, because I can't read the chat and talk at the same time, or you can throw questions at me, whatever you like.
Sure. So one, it's not really a question, but one thing that have come through the chat, so that the White House has issued a new strategy and call for public-private partnerships. So I can copy and paste that into the chat. So if people are interested, they can look at and see that. That came in from Paul. So thank you, Paul. Bill just put into the chat, we've been asking communities, urban, rural, incarcerated, unhoused, in coffee shops, art museums, Congress, and correctional facilities, what people already know and what they'd like to know, sharing stories and emphasizing the benefits and federal investment in neuroscience research. Mm-hmm. Great response when we go places and listen and consider evidence-based policy changes. So I think that's good to kind of put out there. There's so much noise. Having those stories about how it impacts people, particularly over the next couple of weeks, and putting that in front of members of Congress is going to be really important for them to get those appropriation bills sorted. Does anyone else have any questions for Lyle? I know I do, but I will take those offline because I'm sure that they would bore most people who are not appropriations geeks. So,
well, Leslie, good to know you're in the club.
Thank you so much, Leslie. Thank you, Lyle. There's a lot going on, and I'm glad we have you with boots on the ground to help inform us. We're going to move on now to Diana Fellner, who's our treasurer for the annual Treasurer's Report. Diana, take it away.
Thank you, Matt. And I know this is the moment that everyone has been waiting for, the Treasurer's Report. So with that, the American Brain Coalition continues to keep a very modest operating budget. This year's total budget is over $300,000, which means we do quite a bit with the little resources we have. Membership dues remain the largest portion of our income, with nonprofit membership dues making up over half of our income. With nonprofit, we also receive, a modest amount of income from a few sponsorships over our educational programming. New in 2021, the ABC board approved an updated corporate members due structure, which allows smaller device companies to join the Brain Coalition along with larger pharmaceutical companies who've been active for some years now. In 2020, ABC was provided a COVID-related payroll protection plan loan, which was forgiven in 2021. Our expenses remain low with our 2.5 staff working from home. Our executive director, Katie, is a 3/4 time employee. The ABC's program coordinator, Sheila, is a half-time employee. And ABC's new social media intern started working in June and is working 5 to 10 hours per week. With that, any questions?
If not, thank you very much, Diana. And we're going to move on to Patrick to help us start to close out this session. He's our program committee chair, and he's going to give us his report. Thank you.
Thank you, Matt. So ABC has been proactive in our response to the ongoing pandemic by creating a neuroscience in the midst of COVID-19 resource page, which is regularly updated with the latest education and advocacy resources related to COVID and the brain. On April 28th, ABC teamed up with the American College of Neuropsychopharmacology in hosting a Congressional Neuroscience Caucus briefing on COVID and PTSD among healthcare workers. The pandemic was highlighted the critical needs to focus on its impact on the mental health of healthcare workers involved in the response to this emergency. This briefing including a doctor who from day one was on the front lines himself and described his experiences and challenges. A recording of the briefing, as well as a summary, can be found on the ABC's website. Some other resource, the ABC is committed to providing its members. We've increased some stuff on our resources page to include an awareness calendar, including a compiled list of advocacy events, Brain Awareness Week, research and submission opportunities for scientists, career and internship opportunities at our various member organizations and offices, neuroscience diversity resources, and responsible use of animals and research resources. In addition, ABC has increased its resources on ways the membership and public can get involved in neuroscience. The ABC board will be discussing this idea further at our upcoming meetings in hopes of increasing our efforts even further in 2022. So if anyone has any questions, I'd be more than happy to answer them. And as always, if you have any resources to share with us and our members, please send them either to myself or Katie, and we can get those out to the membership.
Thank you, Patrick.
Thank
Any
you.
questions, folks? If not, I'm not seeing anything in the chat. I will turn it over to our executive director, Katie Sale, to tell you about the last trip around the sun. So Katie, take it away.
Thank you, Dr. Rizzo, and I will be quick. Basically, we have hired, am I on video? I can't tell.
You're on.
Oh, okay, good. All right,
Yep.
just making sure. You know, on my end, I've got all the doing all the back work. So, okay, all right, good. Just making sure. So we have, as Diana mentioned, we have hired a social media intern in June, and lucky enough to have her still helping us out about 5 to 10 hours a week. And she has really ramped up our social media activity. So if you are not currently linked with us, make sure that you are, because we have been posting, reposting, tweeting, and all of those kinds of things. So we will continue to do that for us. So get in touch with us if not, which has allowed our program coordinator, Sheila Stern, to step up on sort of the everyday membership activities. So she's been very helpful in that way as well. We are redesigning a new website, which we are excited to launch in early 2022. So with all of the resources and advocacy and educational efforts that you have heard about the last couple hours, we just have a lot of information on our website, and we feel that we've outgrown it. So we're excited to launch that and look for that in early 2022. As you know, last year we displayed, or actually we put together a member seal for each of you, and you have been displaying those on your website, sort of saying, hey, I'm a proud member of the ABC. And we can thank Janet Heischetter for that good idea. If you don't have your member seal, if you lost your member seal, if you need a new one, just let us know. We would love to resend it to you and hope that you would prominently display that. And then lastly, we have our second annual report coming out the end of this year. So look for that, and it will sort of summarize all of the fun activities and events and advocacy and educational opportunities that we have been working on. And I believe that is all I have for now. So Dr. Rizzo, I will turn it back over to you.
Thank you very much, Katie. I want everybody to know that Katie was up pretty much in the middle of the night getting everything ready for today. And, you know, just kudos to Katie and to Sheila and to the board members and to all of you for being members. I think we're fighting the good fight together. It's a campaign. It keeps going and going. And we believe, and we say this again and again, that a rising tide floats all boats. So please get in touch with us if you have any questions. You see the slide here, the contact our staff with Katie and Sheila. We have our website listed. You can click on the URL. So we're really grateful that you're with us. Tell your friends and have them join too. And we'll see you next time. So thanks very much, and keep up the good fight. Bye-bye.